It started with a single text. I had been scrolling through my phone after a long day at work when her message appeared, blinking innocently on the screen. "You're not invited to the wedding. Goodbye, loser." I froze. My hand hovered over the phone, disbelief rooting me to the couch. My heart thudded painfully against my ribcage, and I blinked, hoping somehow, impossibly, that the words would vanish if I stared long enough. But there they were, brutal and exact, typed in all caps as if to hammer in every ounce of rejection. For a second, the world seemed to shrink around me. The apartment felt suffocating. The walls pressed inward, echoing the betrayal that burned hotter than anything I had ever felt. I couldn't comprehend how she, my sister, my blood, could write something like this, with such cruelty, such finality. All I wanted was a chance to ask her why. To beg her, maybe, to let me be a part of something that mattered more than anything in her life. But the reality of the text hit me like a fist. There was no reasoning with this. Then another notification appeared. My dad had liked her message. Liked it. I stared at the screen, nauseous. Liked it. Like a proud parent applauding a punch to my gut. My vision blurred. I had always imagined my dad would shield me, that he would quietly intervene when family dynamics went too far. But this was complicity. Approval. Endorsement. A shiver ran down my spine, equal parts shock and rage. The anger pooled in my chest, and I struggled to breathe as the betrayal sank in. I thought of all the times I had supported her ambitions, defended her choices, covered for her mistakes, lent her money she never repaid. All the nights I stayed up planning, helping, fixing, and she rewarded me with humiliation and exclusion. For a moment, my fingers hovered over the keyboard, itching to send a flurry of messages. To scream, to cry, to demand answers. But then, something shifted inside me. Something that had been quietly building over years of being overlooked and taken for granted. This time, I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to plead. I wasn't going to make myself small to soothe their egos. I typed a single word, fine. And then, with deliberate calm, I removed every payment I had made for her wedding, the deposit, the catering, the linen, every contribution I had offered. Every dollar I had invested vanished from their plans. It wasn't a tantrum. It wasn't a rebellion for attention. It was reclaiming what was mine, my choices, my energy, my resources. The next morning, my phone exploded. Messages, missed calls, notifications flooding in from every corner of my family. 30 messages from Dad, his voice frantic even through the screen. My mother and sister combined for a staggering 107 missed calls. Every buzz of the phone was a reminder of their panic, their disbelief, their insistence that I bend, explain, apologize, return. I stayed silent. Sitting in my apartment, watching the sunlight glint off the windows, I realized something profound. For the first time, I had control. For the first time, their approval, their recognition, their validation wasn't necessary. For the first time, I wasn't invisible. I was choosing myself, and it was terrifying and exhilarating, all at once. Years of being the good daughter, the helper, the peacemaker had taught me one thing: silence could be more powerful than any argument, more cutting than any words. And as I held my phone, untouched and ignored, I understood, this betrayal, brutal as it was, might just be the beginning of my freedom. Hurt isn't always loud. Sometimes it whispers, subtle and insidious, curling around your thoughts and refusing to let go. After the whirlwind of the text and my silent revolt, I expected anger, fury, maybe even tears, but instead, I was left with a quiet, persistent ache that I couldn't shake. I felt hollow, like someone had pulled out a piece of me I didn't know I depended on. I spent the day replaying their actions in my mind. Her words, so sharp and deliberate, cut through every memory we had shared. My father's approval, a single thumbs up, felt like salt on an open wound. And my mother's frantic calls, pleading and confused, only reminded me of how little my existence seemed to matter in the grand hierarchy of their priorities. I remembered every sacrifice I had made for them. Every birthday I had helped plan, every argument I had smoothed over, every time I had given up my own happiness to support theirs. And now, I was invisible. Unworthy. A ghost at the edges of their carefully curated lives. The hurt twisted into anger, sharp and bitter. I imagined the wedding, the decorations perfectly aligned, the laughter ringing through a hall that I would never see, the toasts and dances that I had no part in. I imagined her smiling, radiant in her gown, surrounded by everyone who mattered, except me. And with each imagined scene, my pulse quickened, not with jealousy, exactly, but with a simmering determination. I walked through the city streets that evening, the cold air biting my cheeks, trying to shake the weight in my chest. Streetlights blurred past like fragmented thoughts, and the sounds of traffic and distant laughter only amplified my solitude. Yet with each step, I realized that the hurt was also a strange kind of clarity. For the first time, I could see how much I had given away, how much of myself I had sacrificed to earn love and validation that I would never receive. I thought about the life I had been living, the one carefully measured against their approval. Every decision I had made, every choice I had deferred, every ambition I had silenced, had been influenced by their expectations. And now, stripped of their permission, I felt unmoored, yes, but also free. For the first time, I understood that the hurt was not just pain, it was a signal. A signal that the life I had been living was not fully mine. And if I wanted to survive this, I had to make a choice, to sink under the weight of betrayal, or to rise above it. I spent hours reflecting, journaling every thought and memory, every sting and tear, trying to untangle the knots of anger and sorrow. I cried quietly in my apartment, letting the hurt flow freely, and yet, amid the tears, there was a strange sense of empowerment. This pain was mine, yes, but it was also fuel. It was a fire that could either consume me or ignite a path forward. By nightfall, I felt the first stirrings of resolve. They could hurt me, yes, but they could not define me. Their betrayal, once a dagger to my heart, was beginning to transform into something else, a mirror showing me what I had denied myself for far too long. And in that mirror, I saw not just the hurt, but the possibility of strength, of independence, of a life that belonged entirely to me. The first step had been silence. The second would be reclaiming myself, and I was ready. Days passed, and with each one, I felt the sting of their messages fade slightly. 30 frantic texts from my father, hundreds of missed calls from my mother and sister, none of it mattered anymore. I had learned a powerful truth: their desperation could no longer dictate my emotions. For the first time, I was free to focus entirely on myself, my dreams, and the life I had postponed for their whims. I took the money I had once poured into her wedding and redirected it toward myself. Small indulgences at first, books I had been meaning to read, courses I had postponed because they weren't practical, a weekend trip I had always dreamed of. But soon, the choices grew bolder. I signed up for workshops, started investing in my personal growth, and explored creative projects I had long buried beneath their expectations. Every decision, every investment, every experience became a declaration of independence. With each passing day, I noticed subtle but profound changes. The quiet anxiety that had always followed me began to lift. I felt lighter, as though shedding the weight of their approval had removed an invisible anchor. Laughter, once rare and tentative in my life, returned naturally. I began to reconnect with old friends who truly valued me, not as someone to fix, soothe, or support, but as a person in her own right. Their warmth reminded me of a world that existed outside the suffocating orbit of my family. I discovered creativity I had almost forgotten. Sketching, writing, even experimenting with small business ideas, all of it awakened a joy that had been buried under years of caretaking and compromise. Every evening, I returned home energized rather than depleted, my mind alive with ideas, plans, and possibilities. Most importantly, I discovered self-respect. I realized that my worth was not measured by their acknowledgement. I did not need to beg for their love or approval. I did not need to fit into the narrow definitions they had set for me. This revelation was liberating, almost intoxicating. I no longer feared their judgment, their disappointment, or their anger. I was my own authority, my own protector, and my own advocate. And as I built this new life, a quiet, powerful satisfaction began to take root inside me. I recognized that revenge didn't have to be loud, cruel, or vindictive. The sweetest revenge was simply to live fully, unapologetically, and beautifully, on my terms. Let them fume, let them beg, let them realize too late that they had underestimated me. Every step I took, every choice I made, reinforced a profound truth: I was not defined by betrayal. I was not diminished by their cruelty. And I was certainly not limited by their expectations. I had turned hurt into fuel, silence into strength, and betrayal into a doorway leading to a life I truly deserved. In the solitude of my apartment that night, I smiled for the first time in years without reservation. I felt whole. I felt capable. And most of all, I felt free. Freedom was not simply the absence of them, it was the presence of me, fully, boldly, and beautifully alive. The day of the wedding arrived, and I watched from a distance, not out of spite, but out of a newfound calm and confidence. My phone remained silent, my presence unnecessary. Social media erupted with pictures: her radiant smile, the exquisite dress, the meticulously decorated hall, and friends and family posing together in perfect harmony. I felt none of the jealousy I had imagined I might. Instead, I felt a serene satisfaction that came from knowing I had reclaimed my life while they were still trapped in their drama. The truth of the matter was quietly delicious. A mutual friend, someone who had witnessed the chaos, sent me a text I hadn't expected: "Her wedding is hitting huge budget problems. I thought you should know." I blinked at the message, a slow smile spreading across my face. Every dollar I had removed, every contribution I had withdrawn, had set off a chain reaction of confusion, frantic scrambling, and logistical headaches she hadn't anticipated. The perfect day she had planned, so carefully, so arrogantly, so assuredly, was unraveling in ways I had only imagined. Yet I didn't gloat. I didn't text or call. I didn't send a single word to aggravate them further. That was the beauty of my revenge: it didn't need noise, confrontation, or petty vindictiveness. It simply existed in the contrast between our lives. I had chosen my own happiness, my own fulfillment, and my own dignity, and that alone was more powerful than any argument or insult. Instead, I focused on myself. I spent the day with friends who truly cared for me, exploring a new exhibit at the art gallery, savoring a cafe I had always wanted to try, and laughing freely without worrying about the weight of their expectations. Each moment reminded me of how far I had come, from the ache of betrayal to the triumph of independence. I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. The hurt I had felt in Chapter 2 had been raw and suffocating, almost unbearable. But it had propelled me forward, forcing me to examine my life, my choices, and my worth. Chapter 3, my self-empowerment, had been exhilarating, a liberation I had never imagined possible. And now, Chapter 4, my revenge, was not a fiery confrontation but a quiet, undeniable proof that I had risen above them all. I realized that the sweetest revenge isn't about causing someone pain. It isn't about public embarrassment, angry confrontations, or harsh words. It is about reclaiming your life, thriving in ways they cannot touch, and shining so brightly that their absence of recognition or support becomes irrelevant. It is about living so fully that their attempts to wound you are meaningless. As the sun set, casting a golden glow over the city, I felt a deep, resonant peace. I had been betrayed, overlooked, and undervalued, but I had turned every pang of hurt into fuel for my growth. I had transformed anger into clarity, rejection into freedom, and cruelty into self-respect. And in that moment, I smiled, not in triumph over them, but in triumph over my own limitations, my own fear, and my own past. The wedding had gone on without me, but my life was unfolding exactly as it should, beautifully, powerfully, and entirely on my terms. That, I realized, was the sweetest revenge of all.